Sarah Martinez walked into the small coffee shop near the military base, her shoulders straight and her eyes scanning the room like she owned the place. She wore a simple black t-shirt and jeans, but something about the way she carried herself made people notice. When she sat down at the counter, the barista couldn't help but stare at the intricate tattoo on her forearm, a detailed design featuring an eagle, anchor, and trident that seemed to shimmer under the fluorescent lights. "That's some serious ink you got there," the barista said, sliding her coffee across the counter. "Military?" Sarah nodded curtly. "Navy SEAL," she said, her voice steady and confident. "Just finished a deployment in Afghanistan." Word spread quickly in the small town. Within hours, everyone knew there was a female Navy SEAL sitting in Murphy's coffee shop. People began gathering, whispering among themselves. Female SEALs were extremely rare, and most folks had never seen one in person. By evening, Sarah found herself surrounded by curious locals at the town bar. She told stories that made their jaws drop, tales of night raids, helicopter insertions, and classified missions that she claimed she could barely talk about. Her details were impressive. She knew military jargon, spoke about weapons with authority, and described combat scenarios with such vivid precision that even the local veterans nodded with respect. "I was the only woman in my unit," she explained to the growing crowd. "Had to prove myself every single day. But once you earn that trident, nobody questions you anymore." An older veteran named Tom bought her drinks all night. "My son's in the Navy," he said with tears in his eyes. "Knowing there are warriors like you out there protecting him means everything to me." Sarah accepted the praise gracefully, but something flickered in her eyes. A brief moment of uncertainty that disappeared as quickly as it came. She touched her tattoo unconsciously, as if drawing strength from it. The next morning, Sarah checked into the local motel and continued her routine. She jogged through town in military-style PT gear, visited the base commissary where she casually mentioned her SEAL background to anyone who would listen, and even offered tactical advice to some young Marines she met at a local gym. "The key to surviving Hell Week," she told them, "is mental toughness. Your body will want to quit 1,000 times, but your mind has to be stronger." The Marines listened intently, taking notes on their phones. One of them, Corporal Jackson, was so impressed that he posted about meeting a female Navy SEAL on social media. The post went viral within hours, with hundreds of shares and comments praising Sarah's service. But social media can be dangerous territory for someone with secrets. Among the thousands of people who saw the post was Lieutenant Commander Davis, a real Navy SEAL who happened to be scrolling through his feed during a rare break between training exercises. Something about the story didn't sit right with him. Davis had been a SEAL for 12 years. He knew every female who had ever attempted SEAL training, and he definitely knew every woman who had successfully completed it. The number was so small that they all knew each other personally. He had never heard of anyone named Sarah Martinez. Curious and slightly suspicious, Davis began making phone calls. He contacted his network of SEAL teammates, instructors, and administrative personnel. Nobody had any record of Sarah Martinez. No deployment records, no training records, nothing. Meanwhile, Sarah continued her performance in the small town. She had lunch with the mayor, who thanked her for her service and asked if she'd speak at the upcoming Veterans Day ceremony. She agreed enthusiastically, already mentally preparing a speech that would further cement her reputation. That afternoon, while Sarah was shopping at the local military surplus store, her phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. "We need to talk. Meet me at the pier at sunset. A concerned citizen." Sarah stared at the message, her heart rate quickening. She had been so careful, so thorough in her preparation. She knew military protocols, understood SEAL training procedures, and had researched enough real missions to make her stories believable. Her tattoo was professionally done by an artist who specialized in military ink. Everything about her performance was perfect, or so she thought. As the sun began to set, Sarah walked toward the pier, her mind racing through possibilities. Maybe it was just another veteran who wanted to share war stories. Maybe someone wanted to thank her privately. But deep down, she knew her carefully constructed world was about to come crashing down. The pier was empty, except for a figure standing at the far end, silhouetted against the orange sky. As Sarah approached, she could make out the outline of someone in civilian clothes, but there was something unmistakably military about their posture. "Sarah Martinez?" the figure called out. "That's me," she replied, trying to keep her voice steady. "Or should I say, Sarah Chen, former Army cook who was discharged 3 years ago for falsifying records." Sarah's blood turned to ice. Her carefully constructed identity, her months of preparation, her perfect performance. It was all about to unravel. But she had come too far to back down now. She straightened her shoulders and prepared for the confrontation that would change everything. The man at the pier stepped into the light, revealing the face of Lieutenant Commander Davis. His expression was stern but not unkind, like a teacher who had caught a student cheating but still wanted to understand why. "My real name is Sarah Martinez," she said, lifting her chin defiantly. "And I am a Navy SEAL." Davis shook his head slowly. "No, you're not. I've checked with every SEAL command from Coronado to Little Creek. There's no record of you anywhere in our system. But I'm curious about something." He pointed to her tattoo. "Where did you get that ink done?" Sarah instinctively covered her forearm. "A shop in Virginia Beach. Look, I don't know who you think you are, but I'm Lieutenant Commander Davis, SEAL Team 5. And that tattoo is more accurate than most of the fake ones I've seen." His voice carried a mixture of suspicion and genuine curiosity. "The details are perfect. The proportions, the shading, even the way the trident intersects with the anchor. Whoever did that work knows what they're doing." Sarah's confidence began to crack. She had spent months researching every detail of SEAL culture, memorizing deployment schedules, learning military terminology. But she hadn't expected to face an actual SEAL who would scrutinize her tattoo with expert eyes. "I earned this," she whispered, touching the tattoo gently. "Then prove it," Davis challenged. "Tell me about your Bud S-class number. Who was your instructor? What beach did you do log PT on?" Sarah opened her mouth, then closed it. She had rehearsed answers to these questions, but standing face to face with a real SEAL made all her preparation feel hollow and inadequate. Before she could respond, the sound of police sirens filled the air. 3 squad cars pulled up to the pier, their red and blue lights painting the evening sky in flashing colors. Officers emerged with their hands on their weapons, approaching cautiously. Sarah Chen, also known as Sarah Martinez, called out the lead officer. "You're under arrest for stolen valor, fraud, and impersonating military personnel." As the handcuffs clicked around her wrists, Sarah felt the weight of her deception crushing down on her. The crowd that had gathered to watch included many of the people she had fooled: Tom, the veteran who had bought her drinks, the Marines from the gym, even the barista from the coffee shop. "I can't believe it," Tom said, his voice thick with betrayal. "She had us all fooled." The ride to the police station was silent except for the radio chatter between officers. Sarah stared out the window at the town that had welcomed her as a hero just hours before. Now she was just another criminal, being hauled away in the back of a patrol car. At the station, Detective Morrison took her statement. He was a former Marine himself, and his disgust was evident in every question he asked. "Do you understand how serious this is?" Morrison asked, leaning back in his chair. "Stolen valor isn't just a misdemeanor. You've been accepting drinks, meals, and special treatment based on lies. Some of those people you fooled have sons and daughters serving overseas right now." Sarah stared at the table, unable to meet his eyes. "I never meant to hurt anyone. But you did hurt them," Morrison continued. "Tom Williams, the man who bought you drinks? His son died in Iraq 2 years ago. He thought he was honoring his son's memory by supporting what he believed was a fellow warrior." The words hit Sarah like physical blows. She had been so focused on the thrill of being respected and admired that she hadn't considered the real human cost of her deception. "Why did you do it?" Morrison asked, his voice softer now. "Help me understand." Sarah was quiet for a long moment. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely a whisper. "Because for the first time in my life, people looked at me with respect. When I wore that uniform, when I told those stories, I wasn't just Sarah, the failed army cook who got kicked out for lying on her enlistment papers. I was a hero. But it wasn't real, Morrison pointed out. It felt real, Sarah replied, tears beginning to form in her eyes. For 3 weeks, I was the person I always wanted to be. Strong, brave, respected. People hung on my every word. They thanked me for my service. They bought me meals and asked for my autograph. Morrison nodded, making notes. Tell me about the tattoo. Lieutenant Commander Davis said it was remarkably accurate. Sarah's hand moved instinctively to her forearm, even though she couldn't see the tattoo through her orange jumpsuit. I saved up for months to get it done. Found this artist in San Diego who only does military tattoos for active and former service members. He's expensive, but his work is perfect. How did you convince him to do it if you weren't a SEAL? Sarah's face reddened. I told him I was. Same lie, different audience. I had fake documents, a whole backstory prepared. He never questioned it. The interrogation continued for hours, with Morrison methodically documenting every aspect of Sarah's elaborate deception. She had created fake military records, forged discharge papers, and even set up a fake social media presence going back years to support her story. This wasn't a spur-of-the-moment decision, Morrison observed. You planned this for a long time. 6 months, Sarah admitted. After I got kicked out of the Army, I felt like such a failure. My family was ashamed. I couldn't find a decent job, and everywhere I went, people looked at me like I was worthless. But when I started researching Navy SEALs, I became obsessed with the idea of becoming one, even if it was just pretend. As the night wore on, news of Sarah's arrest spread throughout the town and beyond. Social media exploded with angry comments from real veterans who felt betrayed and insulted by her actions. The video that had made her famous now became evidence of her crime, shared thousands of times with commentary about the dangers of stolen valor. But among all the anger and outrage, there were also questions. How had she managed to fool so many people, including experienced veterans? What drove someone to create such an elaborate lie? And most intriguingly, why was her tattoo so remarkably authentic when everything else about her story was false? In her cell that night, Sarah lay on the thin mattress and stared at the ceiling, wondering how she had let things go so far. Tomorrow she would face a judge, and her story would become public record. The hero she had pretended to be would be remembered as nothing more than a fraud. But there was something about her tattoo that even she didn't fully understand, something that Lieutenant Commander Davis had noticed but hadn't yet figured out. The truth about that tattoo would soon change everything. The courthouse was packed with angry veterans, curious reporters, and local residents who felt betrayed by Sarah's deception. She sat at the defendant's table in an orange jumpsuit, her hands folded in her lap, trying to ignore the hostile stares, burning into her back. Judge Patricia Wells called the court to order, her expression stern as she reviewed the case file. Ms. Chen, you're charged with stolen valor under federal law, fraud, and impersonating military personnel. How do you plead? Sarah's attorney, a tired-looking public defender named James Parker, stood up. Your Honor, my client pleads guilty to all charges. A murmur of satisfaction rippled through the courtroom. Tom Williams, the veteran who had bought Sarah drinks, shook his head in disgust. Several Marines from the local base had taken time off to attend the hearing, wanting to see justice served. But before Judge Wells could proceed with sentencing, the courtroom doors opened with a loud creak. A tall man in a crisp Navy uniform walked in, his chest decorated with ribbons and medals that spoke of years of distinguished service. The room fell silent as he approached the bench. Your Honor, I'm Admiral Robert Hayes, Naval Special Warfare Command, he said in a voice that commanded instant respect. I request permission to address the court regarding this case. Judge Wells raised an eyebrow. This is highly irregular, Admiral. What's your interest in this matter? I believe there may be information relevant to these proceedings that hasn't been brought to light, Hayes replied. Information that could significantly impact the court's understanding of this case. Sarah looked up for the first time, confusion written across her face. She had never seen this admiral before in her life. What could he possibly know about her case? Judge Wells considered the request. Very well, Admiral, but keep it brief. Hayes turned to face Sarah, his eyes studying her intently. Ms. Chen, would you please stand and face the court? Sarah stood slowly, her legs shaking. The Admiral walked closer, his gaze fixed on her forearm where her tattoo was visible beneath her jumpsuit sleeve. Your Honor, I need to examine the defendant's tattoo, Hayes said. Objection, called the prosecutor. What relevance does this have to the charges? I believe it has significant relevance, Hayes replied calmly. Judge Wells nodded. Proceed, but quickly. Hayes approached Sarah and gently turned her arm to get a better look at the intricate sealed trident tattoo. The courtroom was dead silent as he examined it, his expression growing more puzzled with each passing second. Ms. Chen, Hayes said quietly, where exactly did you say you got this tattoo? A shop in San Diego, Sarah whispered, her voice barely audible. The artist specialized in military tattoos. Hayes nodded slowly, then stepped back. Your Honor, this tattoo contains specific design elements that are only known to a very select group of people, the particular way the eagle's wings are positioned, the exact angle of the trident, and especially this small anchor detail here. He pointed to a tiny symbol near the base of the design. The prosecutor stood up. Your Honor, I fail to see how the artistic merits of a fake tattoo are relevant to— It's not fake, Hayes interrupted, his voice carrying absolute authority. This tattoo design is based on a classified special operations memorial. It contains elements that honor a specific mission that was never made public. The only people who would know these details are those who were directly involved in Operation Neptune's Shield. Sarah's face went white. I don't know what you're talking about, I just picked it from a book of designs. Hayes shook his head. No, you didn't. This design was created by Master Chief William Chen, a Navy SEAL who was killed in action during a classified operation in 2018. He designed it as a memorial for his fallen teammates before his final deployment. The courtroom erupted in whispers. Sarah staggered backward, her attorney reaching out to steady her. That's impossible, Sarah gasped. My father's name was William Chen, but he wasn't military. He died when I was 12. He was just a mechanic. Admiral, Hayes studied her face carefully. Ms. Chen, what was your father's middle name? James, Sarah replied automatically. William James Chen. But he— Master Chief William James Chen, Hayes said softly. Decorated Navy SEAL, 3 Purple Hearts, Silver Star. He served his country for 22 years before being killed in action. Sarah's legs gave out and she collapsed into her chair. No, that's not possible. My mother told me he was a mechanic. She said he died in a car accident. Hayes reached into his briefcase and pulled out a file. Your mother, Lisa Chen, was briefly married to Master Chief Chen. After their divorce, she moved across the country and changed her name back to Martinez. She told people he was dead because she didn't want to be connected to military life anymore. But why would she lie to me about this? Sarah asked, tears streaming down her face. Fear, Hayes replied gently. Your father was involved in extremely dangerous missions. Your mother was terrified that something would happen to him, and she was angry about the constant deployments. When they divorced, she wanted to protect you from that world entirely. Judge Wells leaned forward. Admiral, how does this relate to the tattoo? Hayes opened the file and pulled out a photograph. This is the original design your father drew before his final mission. He gave it to his teammate, Master Chief Rodriguez, with instructions to have it made into a memorial tattoo if he didn't come home. Sarah stared at the photograph, her mind reeling. The design was identical to her tattoo in every detail. Master Chief Rodriguez runs a tattoo shop in San Diego now, Hayes continued. When Ms. Chen came to him claiming to be a SEAL, he was suspicious, but when she said her name was Chen, and he saw the resemblance to his fallen teammate, he began to wonder. He did the tattoo and then contacted me. So you've known about this case from the beginning? Judge Wells asked. Rodriguez called me 3 days ago, Hayes confirmed. We've been investigating Ms. Chen's background ever since. What we found was a daughter who never knew her father was a war hero, raised by a mother who was too traumatized by military life to tell her the truth. Sarah looked around the courtroom, seeing the faces of the people she had deceived. But now their expressions had changed from anger to something more complex, a mixture of confusion, sympathy, and understanding. Tom Williams, the veteran who had felt so betrayed, stood up slowly. "Are you saying her father really was a hero?" Hayes nodded. Master Chief Chen saved dozens of lives during his career. He died protecting a village in Afghanistan from insurgent attack. His sacrifice allowed 43 civilians to escape to safety. Sarah buried her face in her hands, overwhelmed by the revelation that everything she had believed about her father was a lie, and that her own lies had somehow connected her to a truth she never knew existed. "Your Honor," Hayes said, "I'm not excusing Ms. Chen's actions. What she did was wrong and she must face consequences. But I believe the court should understand that this case is more complicated than it initially appeared." The judge called for a recess, and Sarah found herself in a small conference room with Admiral Hayes, her attorney, and Lieutenant Commander Davis, who had arrived shortly after the courtroom revelation. Sarah sat in stunned silence, trying to process the earth-shattering news about her father. "I need you to understand something," Admiral Hayes said gently. "Your father talked about you constantly. He carried your picture on every deployment, and he sent letters to you that your mother returned unopened." Sarah's eyes filled with tears. "She told me he abandoned us. She said he didn't care about his family. He cared so much that it hurt." Hayes continued. "When your mother left and took you away, it broke something inside him. But he respected her decision because he thought it would give you a better, safer life." Lieutenant Commander Davis leaned forward. "The reason I was so interested in your tattoo is because I knew Master Chief Chen. He trained me during my early years as a SEAL. He was one of the best men I've ever known." "But I still lied," Sarah said, her voice cracking. "I pretended to be something I wasn't. I dishonored his memory." "Yes, you did," Admiral Hayes agreed, not sugarcoating the truth. "But you also did something else, something you didn't even realize. When you wore that tattoo and told those stories, you were unconsciously trying to connect with the father you never knew." Sarah's attorney, who had been silent throughout the exchange, finally spoke up. "Admiral, what does this mean for the case? My client still committed the crime she's charged with." Hayes nodded. "Absolutely. She broke the law, and there must be consequences. But I've spoken with the prosecutor, and we've agreed to a different approach." The door opened, and the prosecutor, District Attorney Margaret Foster, entered the room. Her expression was softer than it had been in the courtroom. "Ms. Chen," Foster said, "your actions were wrong and they hurt people. But given these new circumstances, we're prepared to offer a plea agreement." Sarah looked up hopefully. "What kind of agreement?" 6 months in county jail, followed by 2 years of community service specifically with veterans organizations, Foster explained. "You'll also be required to speak at military bases about the dangers of stolen valor and the importance of honoring real service members. There's one more condition," Admiral Hayes added. "I want you to learn about your father. Really learn about him. Read his service record. Talk to the men who served with him, understand who he was and what he stood for." Sarah nodded through her tears. "I want to know about him. I've wanted to know my whole life, but my mother wouldn't talk about him." After the recess, they returned to the packed courtroom. Judge Wells announced the plea agreement, and the reaction from the crowd was mixed. Some veterans felt the sentence was too lenient, while others believed the circumstances warranted compassion. Tom Williams stood up when the judge asked if anyone wanted to make a statement. "Your Honor, I was angry when I found out I'd been lied to. Real angry. But learning about her father changes things for me. Master Chief Chen was a hero, and his daughter deserves a chance to honor his memory the right way." Several other veterans nodded in agreement, though a few shook their heads in dissent. Over the following weeks, as Sarah served her jail sentence, Admiral Hayes arranged for her to receive copies of her father's service records, commendation, letters, and personal effects that had been stored in a Navy facility. She spent hours reading about his missions, his decorations, and the lives he had saved. Master Chief Rodriguez, the tattoo artist who had unwittingly started the investigation, visited her in jail. He was a stocky man with kind eyes and arms, covered in memorial tattoos for fallen teammates. Your father saved my life in Somalia, he told her through the visitor's glass. We were pinned down by enemy fire, and he ran through bullets to drag me to safety. When you walked into my shop saying your name was Chen, I couldn't believe it. Why didn't you say something right away? Sarah asked. Because I wasn't sure, and I needed to be certain before I made any accusations, Rodriguez explained. But when I saw how much you looked like him, especially around the eyes, I knew I had to investigate. Sarah touched the glass separating them. The tattoo means everything to me now. It's my connection to him. He would have wanted you to have it, Rodriguez said. But he would have wanted you to earn it the right way through service and sacrifice, not through lies. As her jail sentence neared its end, Sarah received an unexpected visitor. Her mother, Lisa, sat across from her in the visitor's room, looking older and more fragile than Sarah remembered. I heard about what happened, Lisa said quietly. I saw the news reports. Why did you lie to me about him? Sarah asked, trying to keep the anger out of her voice. Lisa's hands shook as she spoke, because I was terrified every day he was deployed. Every knock on the door, every phone call, I thought it would be news that he was dead. When we divorced, I wanted to give you a normal life, away from all that fear and uncertainty. But he was a hero, Sarah said. He died saving people. I know, Lisa replied, tears streaming down her face. And I've regretted keeping that from you every day since. When I saw the news about your arrest, I realized that my lies created your lies. You were trying to find the father I kept from you. Sarah reached across the table and took her mother's hand. We both made mistakes. Yes, but yours came from wanting to honor something you never knew existed, Lisa said. Mine came from fear and selfishness. That night, alone in her cell, Sarah stared at her tattoo and made a promise to herself. She would serve her community service with pride. She would learn everything she could about her father's legacy, and she would find a way to truly honor his memory. She had worn the sealed trident as a lie, but now she understood that carrying her father's legacy was a responsibility that required truth, courage, and genuine service to others. The tattoo would remain on her arm, but its meaning had changed completely. Tomorrow, she would begin the journey of earning the right to wear her father's memory with honor. 6 months later, Sarah walked out of county jail into the bright morning sun, carrying a small bag of belongings and a thick folder of documents about her father's military service. Admiral Hayes was waiting for her in the parking lot, along with Master Chief Rodriguez and, to her surprise, Tom Williams, the veteran she had deceived in the bar. Ready to start the real work? Admiral Hayes asked. Sarah nodded, though she felt nervous about facing the world again. During her time in jail, the story had gone national, and she wasn't sure how people would react to seeing her in public. Your first assignment is at the Veterans Medical Center, Hayes explained as they drove through the city. You'll be working with combat veterans who are dealing with PTSD, traumatic injuries, and readjustment issues. It won't be easy. The Veterans Medical Center was a sprawling complex of buildings surrounded by carefully maintained gardens. As they walked through the main entrance, Sarah noticed how many of the patients were young men and women, some missing limbs, others bearing invisible wounds that showed only in their eyes. Dr. Maria Santos, the head of the rehabilitation department, met them in the lobby. She was a former Army medic who had transitioned into civilian healthcare after her own combat deployments. Sarah, Dr. Santos said, extending her hand, I've heard your story. I'll be honest with you. Some of our patients aren't happy about having you here. They feel like you disrespected their service. Sarah's heart sank. I understand if they don't want me here, but, Dr. Santos continued, others are curious about your journey. They want to understand how someone could create such an elaborate lie and what you've learned from the experience. Over the following weeks, Sarah threw herself into her community service work. She helped veterans with daily activities, organized recreational programs, and listened to countless stories of real military service. Some veterans refused to interact with her, but others gradually opened up. Sergeant Jake Morrison had lost both legs to an improvised explosive device in Iraq. At first, he was openly hostile towards Sarah, calling her fake whenever she tried to help him with physical therapy exercises. "You have no idea what real service costs?" he said angrily during one particularly difficult session. "You're right," Sarah replied. "I don't. But I'm trying to learn, and I'm trying to do something meaningful with what I've learned." Slowly, Jake began to soften. He saw how Sarah arrived early every day, stayed late, and genuinely cared about the veterans she worked with. One afternoon, as she was helping him with wheelchair navigation practice, he asked the question she had been dreading. "Why did you do it? Why pretend to be something you weren't?" Sarah stopped pushing the wheelchair and sat down on a nearby bench. "Because I felt empty and worthless. When people thought I was a hero, they treated me with respect I had never experienced. But I realize now that I was stealing something that belonged to people like you and my father." "Your father was really a SEAL?" "Master Chief William Chen," Sarah said with pride. "Killed in action in Afghanistan. I never knew him, but I'm learning about him now." Jake studied her face. "That tattoo on your arm, is it really his design?" Sarah nodded. "He drew it before his final mission as a memorial for fallen teammates. I had it done thinking it was just a cool design, but it turned out to be my connection to him." "Show me," Jake said. Sarah rolled up her sleeve, revealing the intricate trident design. Jake examined it carefully, his expression changing from curiosity to something approaching respect. "My unit worked with some SEALs in Fallujah," he said quietly. "They were the toughest guys I ever met. If your father was one of them, you come from good stock." "I'm trying to live up to that legacy," Sarah replied, "but I know I have a long way to go." As months passed, Sarah's work at the medical center expanded. She began speaking at local schools about the importance of honesty and the dangers of stolen valor. Her message was powerful because she spoke from personal experience about the harm that lies can cause. "I thought I was just pretending to be a hero," she would tell high school students. "But I was actually insulting real heroes and their families. When you lie about military service, you're not just lying about yourself. You're stealing honor that belongs to people who earned it through blood, sweat, and sacrifice." The hardest part of her community service came when Admiral Hayes arranged for her to meet with families of fallen service members. These meetings were voluntary for both sides, but several families agreed to speak with her. Mrs. Patricia Jensen had lost her son in the same operation where Sarah's father died. She was initially skeptical about meeting the woman who had pretended to be a SEAL, but something about Sarah's story intrigued her. "My son Danny served with your father," Mrs. Jensen said as they sat in her living room, surrounded by photos of her son in uniform. "They were close friends. Danny wrote home about Master Chief Chen all the time." Sarah leaned forward eagerly. "What did he say about him?" "He said your father was like a big brother to all the younger SEALs." Mrs. Jensen smiled. "Always looking out for them, making sure they knew what they were doing. Danny said Master Chief Chen saved his life at least 3 times. "I wish I had known him," Sarah said softly. "You have his eyes," Mrs. Jensen observed. "And from what I hear about your work at the VA hospital, you might have his heart too. Danny would have liked that." As Sarah's 2-year community service sentence progressed, she began to transform from someone seeking unearned respect into someone genuinely earning it through service. Veterans who had initially rejected her began to see her dedication and sincerity. The breakthrough moment came during a particularly difficult day at the medical center. A young Marine named Carlos Rodriguez, no relation to the tattoo artist, had been struggling with severe PTSD and had refused all help from counselors and volunteers. He spent most days sitting alone in the recreation room, staring at nothing. Sarah had tried several times to engage him in conversation, but he always ignored her. One day she noticed him looking at her tattoo with intense interest. "That's a SEAL trident," he said suddenly, speaking to her for the first time. "Yes," Sarah replied carefully. "It was my father's design. I worked with SEALs in Afghanistan," Carlos continued. "They pulled my squad out of a bad situation, saved all our lives." "My father died in Afghanistan," Sarah said. "Master Chief William Chen." Carlos's eyes widened. I heard about that operation. The whole base was talking about how a SEAL team sacrificed themselves to save a village. For the first time in months, Carlos smiled. Your old man was a hero, a real one. Sarah felt tears welling up in her eyes. I'm trying to be worthy of him. Seems like you're doing okay, Carlos said. You've been here every day for months helping people like me. That's more than a lot of folks do. That conversation marked a turning point in Sarah's community service. Word spread among the veterans that she wasn't just putting in time to fulfill a court order. She genuinely cared about their well-being and was working hard to honor her father's memory in a meaningful way. 2 years after her arrest, Sarah stood before a packed auditorium at the Naval Special Warfare Command in Coronado, California. This wasn't a court hearing or a punishment. It was an invitation. Admiral Hayes had asked her to speak at a ceremony honoring fallen SEALs, including her father. The audience was filled with active duty SEALs, their families, and Gold Star families who had lost loved ones in service. Sarah wore a simple black dress and minimal makeup, her father's memorial tattoo visible on her forearm. She was no longer trying to impress anyone or be something she wasn't. 2 years ago, I stood in handcuffs being arrested for pretending to be a Navy SEAL, she began, her voice steady and clear. I told lies about my service, accepted honor I hadn't earned, and disrespected every person in this room who was actually sacrificed for our country. The audience was silent, listening intently to every word. I did it because I was empty inside and desperate for respect, Sarah continued. But I learned something important during my arrest and community service. Real respect isn't something you can steal or fake. It's something you earn through your actions day after day, year after year. She paused, looking out at the faces in the crowd. Many were the same SEALs who had initially been angry about her deception. My father, Master Chief William Chen, earned your respect through 22 years of faithful service. He died protecting innocent people in Afghanistan, and I never got to know him. But through my community service, I've learned who he really was by working with the veterans he fought to protect. Sarah clicked to the next slide on her presentation, showing a photo of her father in full combat gear, surrounded by his SEAL teammates. This is the last photo taken of my father before the mission where he gave his life. Master Chief Rodriguez, who is here today, took this picture. My father is wearing the same expression I've seen on the faces of every veteran I've worked with at the medical center, determination mixed with concern for his teammates. Master Chief Rodriguez stood up in the audience and gave a small wave. Many people turned to acknowledge him, knowing his reputation as one of the most respected SEALs of his generation. During my 2 years of community service, I've worked with over 300 veterans, Sarah continued. I've helped men and women who lost limbs, who struggle with PTSD, who face the daily challenge of readjusting to civilian life after serving their country, and every single one of them taught me something about what real honor looks like. She clicked to another slide showing photos from the Veterans Medical Center, pictures of her helping patients with therapy, organizing events, and simply listening to their stories. I met Sergeant Jake Morrison, who lost both legs to an IED, but still volunteers to mentor young veterans. I worked with Carlos Rodriguez, who battles severe PTSD but shows up every day to help other Marines who are struggling. I learned from Dr. Maria Santos, who left a successful private practice to dedicate her life to helping combat veterans. Sarah's voice grew stronger as she spoke about the people who had shaped her transformation. These people taught me that stolen valor isn't just about lying. It's about stealing something sacred. When someone falsely claims military service, they're not just lying about themselves. They're diminishing the real sacrifices made by real heroes. Admiral Hayes watched from the front row, nodding approvingly at how far Sarah had come from the broken woman who had been arrested on that pier 2 years earlier. I can never undo the lies I told or take back the pain I caused, Sarah said, her voice beginning to crack with emotion. But I can spend the rest of my life trying to honor my father's memory through genuine service to others. She clicked to her final slide, which showed the memorial tattoo on her arm alongside a photo of the original design her father had drawn. This tattoo connects me to my father, but it also reminds me every day that honor must be earned, not claimed. I will never be a Navy SEAL, and I will never deserve the respect that title carries. But I can be a daughter who honors her father's legacy by serving others with honesty and humility. The auditorium erupted in applause. It wasn't the polite, obligatory clapping Sarah had feared. It was genuine, sustained applause from people who had heard a message of redemption and genuine transformation. After the ceremony, dozens of people approached Sarah to share their own stories or thank her for her honesty. Tom Williams, the veteran who had first felt betrayed by her lies, gave her a firm handshake. "You did good up there," he said. "Your father would be proud of how you turned this around." Lieutenant Commander Davis, who had first confronted her on the pier, was also in the crowd. "I have to admit I wasn't sure you could change," he said. "But what you've built through your community service is more impressive than any lie you ever told." Later that evening, Sarah found herself back at the pier where her false identity had first been exposed. Admiral Hayes joined her there, looking out at the sunset reflecting off the water. "So what's next?" he asked. "I've been accepted to nursing school," Sarah replied. "I want to work with veterans full-time, maybe specialize in trauma recovery. I figure I owe the military community a lifetime of service to make up for what I took from them." Hayes nodded approvingly. "Your father would like that. He always said the best SEALs were the ones who found ways to keep serving even after they hung up their uniforms." Sarah touched her tattoo gently, feeling the raised skin of the memorial design. "I finally understand what this really means. It's not about being tough or heroic. It's about sacrifice, dedication, and putting others before yourself. And you've learned to do that," Hayes observed. As they stood in comfortable silence, Sarah reflected on her journey from fraud to redemption. She had lost everything: her false identity, her unearned respect, and her freedom. But in losing those things, she had found something much more valuable: a genuine purpose and a real connection to her father's legacy. The tattoo on her arm would always remind her of the lies she had told, but it would also remind her of the truth she had discovered about honor, service, and what it really means to be worthy of respect. She would never be a Navy SEAL, but she had become something equally important: a person who understood the value of genuine service and was committed to earning honor through her actions rather than her words. Master Chief William Chen had died protecting others, and his daughter would spend the rest of her life doing the same thing in her own way. The circle was complete, and the memorial tattoo finally meant what it was always supposed to mean: a commitment to serve others with courage, honor, and sacrifice. As the sun set over the water, Sarah made a silent promise to her father that she would continue earning the right to wear his memory with pride, one day of genuine service at a time.